to another episode of The Heart of the Matter. Today we're talking about the role of creative arts in Nigeria's culture and economy. And we have with us Bolanle Austen-Peters, who is an administrator, a producer, director, and costume designer. You also founded Terra Culture. You produced Saro the Musical, isn't it? Saro 2 the Musical. You're in the process right now of producing Waka, and you're co-producing and also costumier for 93 Days, the movie. And you've been somebody who's been very much around the theatre arts, creative arts industry for many, many years. And here's something that you recently said on 1st of October, which was the independence anniversary of Nigeria. And you said our museums could be better. The Tate Museum is visited by 5.5 million people annually, yet we have 44 museums in Nigeria that are falling apart. We are so rich in history and culture, yet we don't have anything depicting that. Nothing about our festivals, nothing about our dynasties. Even Dubai, that really has no history, has museums that are selling their culture in a beautifully executed space. Now, Nigeria is at a crossroads where we're looking to diversify our economy well beyond our traditional mono product of oil and gas. And that begs the question to me whether Nigeria can actually benefit more from the creative arts. But tell us about yourself, Bolanle. How did you come into this creative arts scene? Your history with Terra Culture and all the other wonderful things that you've done.
Well, thanks for having me here.
It's our pleasure.
I'm a lawyer by training,
Okay.
and I worked as a lawyer for a couple of years. I came back to Nigeria, and I did mostly development work. I worked with UNDP and also UNHCR, so naturally, the kind of law that I did was not particularly relevant in Nigeria.
Yes.
So I started looking inwards, asking myself what I would actually enjoy doing. And through that, I discovered going to school in the first place, I enjoy history, and I also enjoy literature and music.
Yes.
And I think what actually started the Terra Culture journey was the fact that I felt we could have a space like the British Council or the French Cultural Center in Nigeria, because as an expatriate, typically the places you visited are those cultural spaces when you travel. And I noticed there was this vacuum in Nigeria where when foreigners as well as even Nigerians come home, there's no cultural space for them to visit.
Yes, yes.
And that's how I came about the idea of putting together Terra Culture.
Fantastic. And, Terra Culture, because I've had lunch there and dinner several times. Yes. You've got the art studio, you've got the library down there. There's quite a lot to do. And it's gotten me thinking about creative arts. What exactly are the creative arts educators?
Well, first, Terra Culture is a hub that sort of like focuses on the identity of the Nigerian. So when you talk about the gallery, it's about our art, the food, obviously our cuisine, the theater space is about our theater, and then we have the visual arts, the gallery, and also literary arts. That's what I try to depict there, that what makes you a Nigerian. But that being said, the creative industry is quite a large and very broad industry. But the tendency is that most people think the creative industry is just about maybe dance or the visual arts, which is painting and what have you. But the United Nations and so many other international instruments and conventions have come out to tell you that, look, there's a lot more that involves, that is termed the creative industry.
Like?
And it starts from when you look at things, anything under design. So when you talk about design of fashion, handbags, belts, accessories, interior design, any form of furniture, any form of toys, when you create toys, dolls, graphic and architectural design, as well as jewelry or any form of jewelry that you create, it all forms under what is known as design. And design is part of the creative industry.
So it's very, very broad.
It is massive. It includes even the arts and craft, when you talk about paperware, yarn, carpeting, and when you talk about things like visual arts, photography, sculpture, and also publishing, any form of newspaper writings and literature essentially is part of the creative industry. And then obviously there's also the creative industries like the museums and the theaters that you visit. So it's a lot more, it's much broader than most people think. It includes music, new media, all of those things fall under the creative industry.
So with something so broad, with an industry so broad, I begin to think about the export potential for Nigeria. I mean, you've talked about, comparisons with the British Council. expatriates coming here, even if it's not what I call regular tourists, you have business tourists.
Yes.
But I don't see why some of this stuff could be arts and crafts, can't be exported overseas. So I'm trying to get a sense, how large is that potential of Nigeria's creative arts industry to become a potential export item?
I mean, let's put it this way. If you look at countries that have focused on their creative industries,
Yes.
some of them are countries that have no natural resource whatsoever. So if you look at Taiwan, if you look at South Korea, if you look at Italy, some of these countries are known simply for their creative industry. So if you look at Italy for leather goods, if you look at what South Korea has done in the area of automobiles and things like that, and the same with Taiwan, you recognize that it's about the creative mind. Any country that focuses more on its human capacity as opposed to the natural resource that comes from the ground. Look at Switzerland, another example. They don't have much in terms of natural resources, but they focused more on creating luxury goods from the expensive watches and then chocolates and things like that. So what countries like that have realized is that the human mind is the most powerful tool for creation as opposed to focusing on the things that come from the ground or that you met there, that nature provided you with. So that being said, if Nigeria were to focus its energies on developing the creative capacity of its individuals or its citizenry, Nigeria will be better, will have much more to talk about today as opposed to focusing on just oil. And in terms of numbers, the numbers are immense. Some people have said that even today, if you look at things like Nollywood, they believe that Nollywood is worth about $590 million annually. Some believe that the music industry can contribute close to about $1 billion to our economy annually. And PwC, a lot of institutions have put together all sorts of studies. I mean, there are lots of figures out there. But I think the important thing is to recognize that in a situation where our country, Nigeria, is heavily dependent on oil, and oil hasn't taken us far. We need to start looking inwards and asking ourselves, what have other countries without natural resources done?
And why can't we do the same?
And why can't we do the same? Especially since Nigeria has such a huge population. And majority of them are young adults.
And of course, what Nollywood shows us, I mean, those are very impressive statistics you were talking about there, is that literally speaking, from nothing, this billion-dollar industry has now emerged, which is ranked, what, the second largest in the world, besides Hollywood and ahead of even Bollywood now. So I think that also shows that Nigerians are very talented people. We've seen the same thing in Nigerian music, that's really popular around the world. Of course, you've also said that theatre has been shown to generate a lot of jobs and a lot of money. Do you have a sense of that scale, or is it too difficult to quantify?
No, I think if you look at England, for instance, the number of theatres that they have, Lagos, let's use Lagos as an example. Lagos has, to my mind, almost no theatre. The National Arts Theatre, that is the biggest and purpose-built space, it's at the moment not in use. If we look at the number of jobs that theatres generate all over the world, it has the potential to change things for us. Now, if I bring it down to Nigeria, I'll use us as an example, terra culture. When we started theatre about 6-7 years ago, there was little or nothing happening in that space. So we created this box that has turned into the most viable theatre space in Lagos today. And from there, all the productions that you've seen that have moved on to the Muzon Center and what have you, all started from there. Now, use Sarah the Musical as an example. Sarah the Musical recruited maybe close to about 150 people during production, Now, imagine if we had 10 theatre companies, 10 theatres, just do the math. And you can imagine if that happened every month or every week in Nigeria. Now, Lion King has been known to generate so far about $6.2 billion. The same with the Phantom of the Opera. They've crossed the $6 billion mark. So Nigeria has the opportunity to create things like this, but without the necessary infrastructure, it's almost impossible for us to generate this kind of revenues. So I think the real issue is that we need to understand that first, we have no comparative advantage in the sciences. We have no labs, we don't have the teachers, we don't have the equipment. So if Nigeria were to focus on those things that come naturally to its people, the young adults that you have today, most can sing, most can dance, most can act. You know, they need very little to get into that zone.
Yes.
So if our energies were focused more on creating more theaters,
Yes.
more galleries, more museums,
Yes.
and if that brought in, like you said, as I mentioned before in my presentation, the Tate Museum alone brought in about 5.5 million people to England last year, in 2014. Imagine the number of tourists that will come into Nigeria if we had museums that are functional.
And of course, if we had the supporting infrastructure like good airports and
Correct.
roads
Roads.
and rail and things like that.
Absolutely.
But it's quite interesting, you know, what you're saying in terms of the scope and the potential. Nigeria is, of course, very rich in culture, and we have so many stories to tell. And what we're seeing already is, if we are not quite understanding the value of what we have, it looks to me like foreign production companies already do that. The musical Fela is a case in point, isn't it? Because that wasn't a Nigerian produced play, was it?
No, it wasn't.
How did that make you feel?
Well, actually, Fela on Broadway made me start my musicals.
Fantastic.
As opposed to most of us who went and clapped and were
Yes.
merry, I was challenged. I asked myself, why are non-Nigerians producing a Nigerian story? And all that is needed are the people, really, to make a musical, apart from obviously the theater space.
Yes.
So after I watched Fela, I promised myself that I will start musicals in Nigeria.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to come back and talk about some of the musicals you've been dealing with. But I then want to come back still and focus on creating jobs out of theatre, creating export potential out of theatre. Does the government really know about this? Do they really understand it? You know, are businesses very much involved in it? These are questions that we want to pick up as soon as we come back straight after this break. Viewers, please stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome, viewers, back to the heart of the matter, where today we're talking about the role of the creative arts in Nigeria's culture and economy. Our special guest today is Bolanle Austen-Peters. Now, before the break, we were talking about, again, the role of creative arts in creating jobs, potential export commodity, and also was asking you the questions about whether the government really knows the potential. Do other businesses, maybe businesses that could sponsor, know the potential? Now, I note that with our new cabinet that's just been announced, we don't have a minister of tourism and culture like we did before. But maybe we don't need one, I don't know. What do you think about that? Is that going to help us to progress in the creative arts industry or not?
Well, I'm not sure even, you know, when you isolate it and say in the creative industry, as a nation, it's not going to help us. It's going to set us back. As it is, the creative industry operates independently, so to speak, of government. And if I were to be part of government, I would be asking myself the question, an industry that can single-handedly raise itself and be a force to be reckoned with now, I should ask myself, what can I do to enhance it and possibly create more jobs through it? It is known that Nollywood alone recruits close to about creates about 1 million jobs annually. Now, I would have asked myself as government, how can I triple this, you know, as opposed to completely disbanding it, so to speak, of any form of support, if there was any in the first place. So when we talk about theatre, you know, and as much as I say creative industry, each particular aspect of it sort of like needs different things. But I think in general, equipment, infrastructure, curriculum, and the kind of training that we're giving, all those things are the areas that government should be focusing its energies on, not necessarily giving you, what is an intervention fund? What does that mean?
Well, an intervention fund, like you mentioned, providing loans at reasonable rates. But I do recall that you've already emphasized the importance of human capacity development. And that can probably only be cured through, on the one hand, vocational training, proper curricula in universities and schools, and I guess providing avenues for people to get real experience. Look at the National Theatre. I mean, you mentioned that that's been sitting down there idle for a long time. There was talk about it being concessioned off. What happened there, and what do you think the government should now do with that particular wonderful piece of architecture?
It's very political. I think it's a federal government
Yes.
structure. So with things like this, highly politicized. The artists don't want them to sell it off. The government wants. You never can tell what the story is. Every day it keeps evolving. But I do understand that there might have been some concession or the other to a foreign body. I do not know for a fact. But be that as it may, what I do believe is, for as long as government also involves itself in running certain things that I believe it's not capable of running, we're not going to make any headway. A lot of businesses, you mentioned that earlier, there has to be a meeting point for arts and business in Nigeria. And at a point, we undertook a study with the funding of the Ford Foundation. I worked with them as a consultant to see how the arts and business councils in Europe and in America have helped to support the arts. You know of the lottery in England and how funding through that goes into all of the different art forms. Correct. And these are things that we need to start putting in place in Nigeria, because it looks like you're putting a pot of money together, but eventually when you disseminate it to the different bodies and they're able to generate revenue, recruit labor, as well as bring in tourists to Nigeria, we get our monies back in multiples. So these are the kind of things that I would imagine that government should be busying itself doing. I'm not sure that they should be in the business of running spaces themselves. And if you can look at what has happened also with our galleries and with our museums, the 44 or so that lie around Nigeria, they're starved of funding. So I think there's a role to play for the private sector to come on board as well.
Yes, and on that theme, because I know that corporate Nigeria is already doing some work in this area.
Absolutely. I think the corporate Nigeria has been doing a lot of that. But I think what we need to do now is get corporate Nigeria to also drive this as a business, not necessarily sponsorships. You know what I mean? So that you are also demanding of the artists that, look, for every 1 penny that I get, how are you going to be able to sustain this? Sustainability is critical. Nobody likes to invest in something that they cannot sustain and they cannot see the returns on investment. So I think it will be apt to suggest that corporate Nigeria should get to a point where they meet with the arts and make sure that funding models also look into the possibility of sustainability.
So let's dig into Saro the musical. And you've already given us an insight into how that came about. You saw Fela, the musical, and you thought, why aren't Nigerians doing this? But was there anything else besides that spurred you on to do this?
Well, like I told you, we had this initiative called Theatre at Terra. And what we did was we just provided space for performing artists to come in and do the plays. Then I realized increasingly that we needed to sort of like raise the bar. It was a little bit, the standards were still a little bit watery, so to speak. So I said, well, I might as well get into it instead of staying by these sidelines. So I got into it. It's very tough. But we started the first one. It was very shaky, but we learned as we went along. With anything in life, with a lot of tenacity and hard work and the grace of God. Eventually, I think that we've crossed the Rubicon. We're in a place where I think that we understand the business of doing musicals now, and hopefully it can only get better.
Okay, but just to give our viewers a deeper insight, take us deeper into, it was tough. What exactly was tough about doing Saro the musical? And of course you did one and you did two.
And then I did three more,
and I did
a third time. Now the first is space. We had our first showing at Oriental Hotel. Acoustically, it's just not suited for musicals. So the marble structure does not work. So we had a lot of problems with the sound. Secondly, and probably the most important, funding. Musicals are very, very expensive. But I mean, they are very expensive.
Well, props, actors.
There are three skill sets. You have the dancers, you have the actors, and then you have the musicians. So you're dealing with three completely different sets. And then you now have the props, you have the crew, you have the cast. And like you and I are aware, we're not a country that is used to doing musicals anyways. So getting the expertise and even the required talents to perform was very difficult. So a lot of
did you have to bring in expertise from overseas to support it?
The first one, we actually did bring in people to do our lighting, to do our sound. We worked with Zed Mirage on the first one. And we realized as we went along also what has happened in the industry is that talent is being groomed. So now we have lighting guys in Nigeria who have just sort of like emerged over the past 3 years who can work with us on musicals. projection, you know, because we are not capable of having our set design done in the way that you can just check.
Yes.
Number one, it's not a permanent space. So we've had to rely more on technology now. And now we have people who can do that. We have to bring in somebody the first time around. So we're beginning to develop skills. And then the dancers are actually a very interesting bunch of people that we need to look at. A couple of years down the line, we didn't have that many institutions promoting dance. In the past 5 years or so, through the efforts of certain individuals, dance now has become not even a job now. People are earning through it. And through our musicals also, we're recruiting a lot more dancers.
And what I notice about dance today in Nigeria is it's no longer just traditional dance, it's contemporary dance.
Absolutely.
I see people mixing ballet with African music. Because I saw that both in Fela and I also saw it in Saro. I was able to watch it at the Oriental Hotel. So I did see some of the things you said about the technology use. I thought it was awesome. Yeah, there were acoustic challenges, all right. But I think overall, it struck me like a play that was really, really well done. I think you had awesome vocalists, you had awesome dancers. But from your perspective as a producer, was it successful? And if so, in what way?
Oh, first, you know, for me, every journey, if you've taken the first step, it's a success.
Of course.
A lot of people talk and never get anything done. So breaking the glass barrier for us, doing something that had never been done at that scale, for me, it was a success. But if you're a perfectionist, you keep asking yourself, can it be done better? So all of the challenges that we faced the first time around, I was determined that we would not face it the second time around. By the second time around, we're taking out the issues of acoustics, the issues of stage props, little things, niggly little bits, bits and pieces here and there. So by the second time, it was neater, it was tighter. By the third time, we're on a roller coaster.
Fantastic. So the learning was there.
The learning was there.
So you've got the bug now, and as far as I understand it, you're right now in the process of producing Waka the musical, which I think is coming out to theatre in Christmas, in December. So tell us about that. How's that one going now?
You know, after Saro the third time round, I got a lot of offers from corporate Nigeria. So I've produced close to about another 6 or 7 musicals. So I guess with everything in life, it becomes easier. And then I also went for a directing course in America. And now I'm directing this play myself because typically I have the vision, I know how I want every scene to look, but because I didn't have a directing background, I stayed in the back and allowed others to do it. But now, what I found out, one, it cuts back on timing, having to translate or get people to understand my vision. So I'm doing that by myself. And I guess because I'm doing it myself, it's also become easier on all of us because I'll come in and I'll be like, this is what I want. And I'm talking straight to the dancers through the director and also the music. So not the first time around where I'll go through a drama director and then I'll come back and say, no, I didn't like it that way, let's do it this way. So it's much easier, to be quite honest with you. It's smooth.
So you're happy? You're smiling?
I'm having a good time.
Okay. Well,
and you know, with life, things progress. Now we have partners that have come out of the woodworks. We have fashion designers. We have musicians now. They're doing our albums, our soundtracks. Brymo is partnering with us for this new Saro. He's putting together some of the tracks. And then also the University of Southern Illinois, they workshopped the script and edited it for us. That is one area that we suffer a lot in Nigeria. But we had Tunde Babala, a very gifted scriptwriter, put together the first script, and then we sent it to the Americans.
But are you seeing a larger proportion of Nigerians actually now involved in Waka than, say, in Saro? Has the Nigerian footprint grown in producing this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. In fact, majority now, almost, yes.
Excellent. And so you've been doing stage plays, but you're now migrating from the stage to the big screen. And you're right now in the process of co-producing and doing the costumes for 93 Days, the movie. And that features Danny Glover, who, as far as I remember, is a big Hollywood star. How did we get here?
Well, the thing is, production is production. Having done theatre, and the beauty of running terror culture is that we have systems in place. We're one of the few properly structured arts organizations in Nigeria with all sense of humility. So what has happened is we have the food system in place, we have transportation in place, we have relationships with hotels and institutions, more important, corporate Nigeria. So what we bring to the table is this efficiency. And having done so many musicals, we're able to do things almost systematically.
Yes.
Now, I think Nollywood started noticing that, and then we got involved with October 1, the movie.
Yes.
We promoted it for Kunle Afolayan. Then
Yes. Really good movie.
it was a beautiful
Excellent.
movie,
Yes.
and what we did was we got corporate Nigeria to do private viewings for to see his movie before it went to the big screen.
Yes.
And from there, I think a lot more Nollywood producers and directors noticed what we're capable of doing, and then we started getting a lot of offers. I wasn't into movies, to be quite honest, and then the offer to do 93 Days came.
Yes.
The reason why I took on 93 Days, not the others, was because of the story.
Yes.
It's a story that touches every
It's
Nigerian.
about Ebola, isn't
It's
it?
Ebola. It's an Ebola story,
Yes.
how it came into Nigeria, and how First Consultant Hospital responded to it.
Okay.
It's that simple.
So it's wonderful to see that something like this is happening. But I want to focus back on Danny Glover because I want to explore. I mean, it seems that there's more and more collaborations now between Nollywood and Hollywood.
Correct.
I mean, there's a number of other films. We talked to them about Half of Yellow Sun. That had in, is it Chinwetalu, is it Ejiofor,
Yes.
correct name? On the comedy side, we've seen 30 Days in Atlanta, where you had various other people in there. And then now you've got Danny Glover. So how did this collaboration come about, with him in particular?
Now, with Danny Glover, we have Steve Gukers, who is the director of 93 Days.
Yes.
He had worked with him before in Namibia.
Okay.
So it was easy for us to also get access to him. So we reached out to him. Like me, what grabbed me was the script. So we sent him the script and asked him to read it. And when he read it, he was like, I want to do this. But we were giving him a smaller role initially. But when he read it, he said, no, he wants to be the main guy. So he's playing the role of Dr. Ohiri in 93 Days.
Yes.
And then there's also Tim Reed, who is also a veteran American actor. He's also in it. There's Pimon Rami, a producer who's done God knows how many movies in America, who is also one of the producers of 93 Days. Okay. He brought in Tim Reed and a couple of other Americans that worked with us on the project.
So what have Danny and Tim and Pimon actually brought to this? Have they been able to deepen our skills and experience? I mean, what has it been like working with them on this particular movie?
The first thing is you realize that Nigerians are talented.
Yes.
That's what I walked away with, at least the crop of people we worked with.
Yes.
The Nigerian actors that were on board were just as good.
Yes.
Second, we worked with Danny Glover and Pimon and the team. I don't know, maybe it's because of their maturity, but what I did get away from them was they were very simple and humble people they're achievers, but they had no airs. You know, in Nigeria, people do very little and develop an attitude.
Chip on our shoulders.
Yes, they were the easiest people to work with. They listened to instructions. They did what you asked them to do. They were very respectful, and that for me was a takeaway from their personalities. And then on the professional side, they were very professional. Call time is call time. They'll be there when they're supposed to be there. And they also expect you to respect them. And I hope Nigerians have taken that, because our Nigerian crew and colleagues seem to think they can waste other people's time. And I think they taught them that time is money.
Well, look, Bolanle, with that, I'm going to say thank you so much. We're out of time, but you've really enriched and blessed us today.
Thank you.
Well, viewers, look, we hope that you've equally been blessed as we have been in the studio, sharing this discussion with Bolanle Austen-Peters today. If there's one thing I've taken away from today's conversation, is to understand that creative arts is actually quite a broad spectrum of activities, a lot broader than I actually thought it really was. And what we're seeing is Nigerians like Bolanle really going the extra mile, doing great things. We're seeing collaborations with Hollywood stars and producers who clearly see that we can do a lot more. And of course, there's that massive potential as well, as Nigeria seeks to diversify economy away from just oil and gas into new areas. Let's keep striving diligently and let our plans therefore lead to plenty. And let's not just be in haste, rushing around and doing things carelessly, because as my Bible tells me, that leads purely to poverty. Thanks for joining us today, and stay blessed.